I'm not a mainstream AI researcher, so to say, because AI happens to be a tool that I use in my research, but I wouldn't say that I'm AI driven. But having said that, I've always watched with great interest how the AI field has changed over the past decade and a half or so, particularly when it has become integral in our everyday lives, like even in image processing, language translation, whatnot. So I've seen like neural networks grow to what they are, and then give rise to the large language models that we are currently aware of. Most of
Sure.
my AI interest has started after I pretty much started as a postdoctoral fellow and continued with my own group here. I was not particularly involved in any AI driven work. We were using simple machine learning based models earlier to do some of the tasks. I would say that was pretty much my interaction with AI up until I started with large scale genomics work. So my work is in the field of genomics. Genomics essentially deals with understanding what our genome or genetic material says about us. Or, and when I say us, I don't necessarily mean how we look, because that also is controlled by genetics. But I'm more interested in the health consequences of genomics, how our genetic material or changes in genetic material can predispose us to certain disorders, common as well as rare genetic disorders. How genetic material controls function. So for that, we use a variety of techniques. Mostly, we rely on a method called whole genome sequencing. Since COVID happened, almost everyone has heard of whole genome sequencing because that was also used to track SARS-CoV-2 lineages and which variant is spreading where, etc. But we apply it to humans, and we try to ask how humans are different in their genome, and we try to correlate it with some phenotypic outcome. Or a large scale effort towards this is called the Genome India project, in which I'm a part of. And that you might have heard recently about the data release where we have successfully finished analysis of 10,000 healthy Indians from diverse corners of the country. So, one of the programs we are also part of is called the Indian Breast Cancer Genome Atlas, in which we are trying to understand the genomic or molecular basis of breast cancers, particularly a subset of breast cancer known as triple negative breast cancer. Actually, more prevalent in Indian populations, but the exact underlying mechanisms are relatively unknown. So, we are using genomics there as well. The program that I talked about, the Genome India project, which is a multi-institute collaborative project and has sequenced 10,000 healthy individuals, is a good start to sort of form the baseline for genetics-based healthcare. There is a concept of personalized medicine, for example, where you're talking about treating a person like a law of average, where the same drug, same dosage is given to every person. You
Right.
instead customize the therapy based to a person based on their genetic makeup. So you can have them as buckets, as let's say responders, or like they need more dosage, less dosage, or responders, non-responders, and so on. The data that is part of or that is generated as part of this project will form the baseline for this kind of personalized medicine. And more importantly, there is a huge burden of genetic disorders in India. Almost 7 crore people, estimated 7 crore people suffer from rare genetic disorders in India. And that's a large number. Out of time, it actually, the delay in diagnosing these disorders happens because there is no good baseline for Indian populations. So far, we've been relying on population data that's available from the Western or Caucasian population. This kind of reference available, we can improve the diagnostic turnover or rates for genetic disorders, and that we can begin to tackle this massive problem that so far has been ignored. So there are problems that are more local in nature, and this sort of addresses those problems more effectively than relying on the global average. As we know, AI is quite capable in understanding patterns in large scale data that humans may many times miss. And my work in the field of genomics essentially revolves around understanding patterns in high throughput data. We work with large genomes, which are billions of bases, and we want to ask what these bases mean in terms of some health disparities or phenotypic outcomes. So it was a natural gravitation for me that to see if the improvements in AI models can somehow be applied to the questions that we are answering in our field. The main place where we use AI in our work is in understanding something called as epigenetics. So far, whatever I talked about is genetics, where changes in DNA sequence can cause some downstream. But there are also changes that happen on the DNA without changing the underlying base, which are known as epigenetic modifications. And we're also interested in studying how these contribute to phenotypic outcome. In that, we use this method where we sequence the DNA in a specific way, where the DNA information is encoded as electrical signals. And we want to convert these electrical signals to the corresponding DNA sequence as well as the epigenetic modifications that happen on it. And that's a classic AI problem because you have this large signal data and that you want to convert it into the output. Just like how every field has been touched by the AI revolution, genomics was no exception. Genomics, particularly in healthcare and medical settings, has seen a phenomenal change, particularly since the large language models have come. So there are AI approaches to better identify causative variants or associate them with healthcare outcomes. Then there are models that can actually create DNA elements from scratch. I mean, this was something that was unimaginable maybe even a decade earlier because we are talking about regulatory regions which have been poorly understood, but now there are AI models which can create these elements from scratch and they do the function that they're expected to do, and that's mind-blowing, frankly. Then there is of course the traditional image processing algorithms, how AI has taken over them to improve radiology, etc. There is better correlation of the image data with the genomic data. And in all of these, we see new work coming up that are significantly better than what it was. There is a lot of revolution happening in something called the single cell space. So far, when people have been studying, they study in something called a bulk. So you take an average of multiple cells. But now technologies have reached a point where you can take collection of cells and look at each of these cells independently. And of course, there are a lot of data analysis challenges and other things that come with this kind of a data. But there are several newer AI models that are doing remarkably well in addressing these issues, which means that we are now able to look at not just the human body, in fact, any model system that you take at a resolution that is unprecedented. And I'm sure even maybe a year from now on, this space is going to be fully transformed based on the speed with which these AI models are developed. So I'm really looking forward to that. We mostly used AWS for our sort of topping up our compute infrastructure. So as you know, most AI models or inferencing these models require large GPU machines. Our local GPU machines often get overworked because of the amount of inference that we do. So we use AWS to scale up our processing, and that's where we've been using. I can only think that it's going to be way more awesome than anyone can predict. But one thing I foresee is that access to doctors has been a problem, I think, pretty much all over, but specifically to us. Most of our population do not have access or immediate or fast access to good healthcare. Given how AI assistants are improving, we could probably have these virtual doctors scanning most of the problems. And given how pervasive smartphones are in India, I think this means that there is better, equitable, and accessible healthcare to most population of India. Therefore, we can prioritize the cases for real doctors, so to say. That would be a really good thing, which is more local in nature and probably needed for a country like us. In our field, there is uh, often an inhibition to move away from something that's established. But AI, by definition, is improving, let's say, every second. But I would just advise researchers that while it is, of course, important to exercise caution in adopting anything new, so looking at these newer methods to look analyze your own data, look for patterns in your data. It's worth a shot. At the same time, I would also advise researchers to have some ground checks in place so that when you're deviating too much from what is expected, you have a way of tackling it. But definitely, researchers should be willing to try and move away from the norm, so to say, because that is changing very quickly.